What is up, people? EJ Stewart, Shamari Stewart, Kendall Stewart here. This is the X-Men 97 recap and review live stream for New Generation Media, New Generation Podcast Network. And we had the season finale, part of the season finale, beginning with this episode here. We're talking about Tolerance is Extinction Part 1. I'm very curious what you guys got to say about this one. I thought this was one of, it was very, it's very interesting because this is something they've done before, at least in terms of the old show where you had these like extended part one, part twos, part threes here. So this is very much in the spirit of the show, but we kind of had to really push us towards the finish line here, and I think we were not disappointed. You like action, this episode is definitely for you. If you like backstory on a character like Bastion, someone that maybe at least it's our first introduction to him in the in the Marvel animated universe, this is a great thing for him. And if you want cameos, we had a massive cameo in this episode as well, and some really cool confirmations regarding one of those big cameos that happened in this episode. So a lot to get to. I'll go to Sham first. Overall thoughts, initial thoughts on Tolerance is Extinction Part 1, the Part 1 season finale of X-Men 97 Season 1.
Oh, man. Epic, you know.
Boy, ain't no way, boy.
No, sorry about that. Sound mess up there. Sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, no, epic. I guess, the soundboard couldn't contain its
I know, right?
Yeah, epic is the word that I would use. Very cinematic. Just really kind of top tier. Top tier animation. Which I've been consistent on from the get go. But top animation is top tier. This type of animation I want to see more, especially from like different kind of like superhero content. And the story has been great. And especially I thought we got a lot of like very cool action sequences and kind of character moments in this episode as well. Um, for me, the ending was the kicker, and the ending, Professor X's return, which I had been kind of wanting to see for a very very long time, and
Yeah.
and just to me, my X-Men, and just him talking to everyone, and I'm just like, oh man, just like that's he doesn't even need to reboot. He's just like wherever you are, just come, and like Magneto, like doing whatever he did, just shutting everything down.
He's a global EMP.
Yeah, just shutting everything down, basically.
Incredible. Yeah.
So yeah, just that's why he's Magneto. Just showing. So yeah, that was just. And then, as you said, a bunch of cameos, crazy cameos, and Easter eggs on top of Easter eggs on top of Easter eggs. I'm sure Emergency Awesome is going to have probably a couple hour long breakdown from this episode. Just a great, just a very good episode, honestly.
Kendall, initial thoughts on this episode of X-Men 97, this Extinction, Tolerance is Extinction Part 1.
Yeah, I mean, I echo the sentiments of you guys. I mean, this is another strong episode of this season and of this series. And I think what makes this season so great is that each of these episodes, like, they don't do the same thing. It's not like every week it's like the same. Like, they just play the hits, so there's great action in every episode, or it's just they made massive twists in every episode. Like, every episode is kind of different. They tell different themes, different stories, but they're a lot of times they're equally good. And so this episode did things that made it stick out and will be memorable from some of the other episodes that we've seen. But they did it in its own way in this episode, and it was really strong. But like Shamari said, it hit the nail. He hit the nail on the head that they went through the gambit of things, no pun intended, the gambit of things that you want to see in these types of shows when it comes to, you know, the animation being really good and the action fight sequences and choreography and like you mentioned, the backstory, EJ, and all the different things that they've were able to, you know, shove into a very limited amount of time. Um, just really good. And it's just part one. You know, that's where you have to realize that while it does feel limited, it feels like it was fast.
Yeah.
There's still two more parts to this. You know, so the story is not finished.
No, job not done. Definitely with this episode. So you mentioned how the story kind of is fast, and I would say that even literally, like when the runtime came in, like I didn't know what to expect from this. It's a 3-part finale. But like I was like, we had one episode that was kind of long. Obviously, that was episode 5, the big one with the death of Gambit. But like I was like, maybe this will be longer, maybe it will be shorter. I don't know. It came up I think right at 33 minutes, right on, which has pretty much been, they haven't really gone beyond that. It's probably one of the lowest numbered kind of like in terms of how long an episode is that they've done this season. So I was like, okay, so this is not going to be like the longest episode, but you're right, they really packed in a lot. So the big thing they really had to do here, and they did a ton, was really kind of introduce Bastion, who this guy is, what his deal is, and how he is similar or different from the comic book version. So we talked a lot about Bastion's backstory in the last episode in terms of his, you know, origin in the comics, and as I predicted on this show, there was no way they were gonna do like kind of exactly what happened in the comics, because it's very weird, it's a little convoluted, and like most things that regard X-Men in the comics, especially in the 90s, they were probably gonna have to truncate this and make this a little more sense. So I actually think they did something that I think I actually ended up liking a lot more. A little bit of influence from I think would be influenced from Batman Beyond, and how, you know, Terry McGinnis's DNA is, you know, linked to Bruce Wayne, essentially using you know, his father as a vessel for the Nimrod master mold DNA that then gets, of course, when he meets his mother and they have this kid, it presents itself into Bastion, who is this. They present him as a mutant, which I actually thought was interesting, because I guess technically he's a born human who has powers, but his mission is to annihilate mutants, because that is his DNA, based on again being a creation of Nimrod and Master Mold. So they show you his upbringing in this very creepy scene that shows, you know, Cable, Jean Grey, and Cyclops going to his childhood home. We'll talk a lot about that trio that we see for a good portion of this episode as well. And then we get Bastion also kind of telling his mission to Val Cooper, who we kind of see is like, there's a lot going on here in terms of like just kind of like everybody's culpability. So Val, you know, we see that she was not killed in this attack.
And she's not Mystique.
Sorry, what'd you say?
No, I guess she's not Mystique.
I mean, I don't think so, but I'm not really holding out. I'm not completely gonna rule that out yet. But like so far, right now, still playing it very straight, even to the very end, where you think, okay, she's gonna turn at some point, and she didn't. But you know, not, you know, she seems to have, you know, some like knowledge of Bastion and what he's about and what he's been planning to do. But like, it seems like everybody that knows this guy, no one thought that we would see what happened with Genosha. So there is it's like betrayal there for Val Cooper, who knew Bastion, knew of Operation No Tolerance, but was like, this is crazy, like what you've done. And we see some of his machinations and some of his thought process through a very interesting council meeting that he has with some very big names. So we learned that Doctor Doom has been rocking with Bastion, though he's not necessarily thrilled with like Bastion going on pure genocide. He makes that clear. Like, he makes a case. I think his thing was like, you know, collusion doesn't equal like you know, basically like approval.
Like war crime.
Yeah, approval of war crimes. Like, we didn't, like, yes, we kind of colluded because we rock with whatever you're dealing with, because Doctor Doom always has his own missions. But he did not want this to happen. And then Baron Zemo also is questioning Bastion. And Bastion's, first of all, like, clearly they see him. I don't know if they see him as an equal, but all these guys are like egomaniacs. But like they're not looking at him like as some clown. Like he's like they're like telling him like, yo, like I don't like what you're doing, dog, and he's just like giving it back to them like, well, like I don't like care or pull up or like too bad, it's too late. Like so, he's treated with great respect from them, even though they clearly don't dislike him. Just speaking to like his place, I guess, in the Marvel villainy world, and he kind of lays out kind of what his deal is, and that he has, and there's a, I mean, the inspirations to all you know, you know, bigoted like bigoted causes are all there. And it's done, I think, in a way that is very well done. It's they also remixed it well with the '90s. Instead of saying, "Oh, you're going on like YouTube chats or whatever," they were like, "Oh, are you going on like message boards or he said like dial up internet things." I'm like, wow, like they're smart with like figuring out how you would do this, but basically saying, hey, we took people who like kind of were disillusioned, felt a little afraid because they couldn't speak freely or what they thought about the mutant situation, and people didn't know exactly what they were going to be getting involved with, but they wanted to help. And we do this crazy experiment on them, and then we wipe their mind so that they don't even know what happened, and then they are free to be activated at any point. Which the free to activation part is a little like a tweak or a little important thing to know, because we saw Homeboy last week die when Rogue killed what's the name, uh Trask. But like here we know, okay, you don't have to be killed to be activated. He can activate you wherever you want, which you see a ton of. I mean, he activates hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of these Sentinels. We realize they're now all over the world, and this has been something that's been happening over the course of generations. It seems like, and it's a pretty sick, twisted monologue that's delivered by Bastion because of how how again just the cause of it, or at least the mission that he's put out, but also how like cold and like very like matter of fact he is about like his thesis, so to speak. Kendall, what did you make of Bastion, kind of his introduction from his origin to those conversations with Baron Zemo and Doctor Doom, and then of course his overall plot that we learn about in this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is an important thread um, for this series because with a lot of these shows, especially the Disney Plus shows that we've had with Marvel, not just X-Men '97, but some of the live action shows. Um, you know, you can build. A lot of these shows have done a good job of building a fan base and a following early on, but a lot of it's about landing the plane, so to speak. And you know, you can build a great mystery, but once we figure out what's behind the curtain, we gotta like what's behind the curtain. And so when it comes to Bastion, one of the things that this show had to do was create this villain and make him good, because now we're getting this character, and the backstory I think was done well, and they tied it in to the original series well. They made his parents two random characters that showed up in the in the '90s X-Men series from flashbacks
Yep.
to the 1950s, and so there's tie-in and payoff there. Uh, his there may have been there may have been more meat on the bone that they could have done to explore more of um, you know his upbringing, but I think that's the nature of the show, that there's not a whole lot of time. They're on a little bit of a limited window in terms of the amount of things they can do. That'd probably be my only thing that I would have liked, maybe like an extra 2 or 3 episodes just to let some of the stuff breathe a little bit.
Yep.
Um, but regardless, they did a good job with his backstory, and but I think importantly for this character, his moments in this uh, in this series have been good in modern day. I mean, what we've seen from him, uh, he hasn't done a lot on screen as far as we know. So a lot of the stuff that he's done has been off screen as far as we've seen, but regardless, he should, the voice acting has been excellent. We talked about that last week with his character, um, but you mentioned even that the scenes with him and Val Cooper, the scenes of him and Sinister, and then you mentioned that scene with the Marvel version of the Light, with
Yeah.
Doctor Doom, whatchamacallit, and Zemo. Um, the Val Cooper thing is interesting because it kind of harkens back to one of the things with the original OZT Operation Zero Tolerance storyline, is that Bastion's infiltrated the U.S. government, and if you've infiltrated, that is what I think they're illustrating by showing Val Cooper like not
Yeah.
being Mystique as far as we know yet. Maybe
Hmm.
she will eventually become Mystique, but I think that this is the real Val Cooper. But her just being Val Cooper is showing you like, and her not maybe being down with all this stuff shows you like Bastion's tentacles have got like he's so deep inside these circles that it's like they may not even know who they were dealing with, but
Right.
but
Yeah. There's
manipulating the way.
definitely a big there's definitely a big aspect of not everybody realizing who they're dealing with by the time we get to this episode. Um,
Mhm.
it seems like no one's really thrilled with the aspect of the with the genocide of in Genosha, but his rationalization of the sham is again quite chilling. This idea that um, that like people don't like to basically continue to root for a bully, and that like essentially the mutant cause was so like down bad basically that he felt like he had to like give them something to make people feel like there's some kind of issue that actually has to be outlined so that they can actually put forth a real conversation debate about how to move forward. The interesting thing about this sham is we have Cable kind of telling his side of what he knows of Bastion and what he knows of what happens. And what was really fascinating and I think surprised me and probably surprised you, because I think Cyclops and X-Men expecting the same old. Oh, in the future, everything's downtrodden. There's nuclear war and everything's terrible. And Cable's like, no, it's a utopia. It's amazing. Because because essentially he's created these Prime Sentinels as like an entire new species. They're an elevated species above mutants. So it's great for everybody except mutants. Mutants are then the ones that enslave, the ones that are doing the hard labor, the ones that are disenfranchised to a level that's way worse. But because there's so much firepower on the planet, it doesn't impact it in a negative way regarding in terms of just like the state of the earth. Were you surprised, Shamari, at how they twisted that and presented the future Cables in? Is not necessarily, yes, it's dystopian for the mutants in the sense that like where they stand in society is still terrible and worse. They're enslaved, but the world is in his eyes great condition.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I was gonna talk about how that was probably the most intriguing part of this whole like Bastion reveal
Hmm.
was them mentioning that whole reveal of the future because like you said, I'm expecting it's a war with the Sentinels and things are like the Terminator, the old Terminator story, all the Terminators they took over and
Yeah.
just a
Yeah, you're right
war
about that in
torn.
Dragon Ball.
Yeah, exactly. That same old story, but that this was very different. Um, in a sense, what it is, like you said, a utopia, but not for mutants. So just very very interesting, and like you said, that he basically created that he used the same virus that was used on Cable to create this new species of these new species of human sentinel, basically, which is just crazy. Which again just goes to not to go on a tangent, but just my love of X-Men because very heavy sci-fi that I feel like
Yeah,
people kind of don't speak to that a whole lot, but X-Men is very heavy sci-fi, a
for
lot
sure.
of it. But yeah, it's crazy. So it's very, very well done. Really, really cool concept. Horrifying, but cool nonetheless. And it kind of definitely adds to this to the legend of this character, and just that he was essentially like born in like basically born right basically to do this. Like this was like his entire purpose. Um, and I agree with you, Kendall. It would have been nice to get a little space to let that breathe. Maybe let this whole reveal of what's going on in the future breathe. In the original show, you got to see a bit of what was going on with Cable and stuff, and in this one, he kind of shows up, just tells you what's going on, and now we're at war, or we're trying to save the world. Um, so yeah, but I definitely enjoyed that aspect of the story. It's very, very compelling.
Yeah, it's extremely compelling. Again, Bastion, I think lives up to his billing as a true villain. And like a real obvious person to dislike and hate. He he's shown to be the mastermind where he plants right out there that story that hey, Charles Xavier is actually alive, and in the midst of all this movement towards wow, like what happened to Genosha is terrible. Here he is plotting the X-Men aren't even who you think they are. They've been telling you that Charles Xavier is dead and he's actually alive. And this was neat too, because when the X-Men see this on the TV screen, they also it's almost like they've almost like kind of worked themselves into a shoot a little bit, or yeah, that's the word. That's how you would say it in wrestling, where like they kind of like okay, well yeah, we know he's not like dead, but like we didn't know where he was. But like now, it's not good that the whole world doesn't know where he was, because it was kind of interesting how the whole show, they didn't really speak about Professor X like they knew he was alive. They could say well, the Professor's gone and whatever, and they kept moving forward as he was gone. But like here, this was them actually having to acknowledge like, well, yeah, we know he's not dead, or at least we were told he's not dead, and that was going to cause them problems. And I think we kind of see as this episode goes how the tide flips so dramatically from again and to Bastion's thing of like, yeah, let's let them get a quote unquote W in his sick twisted way of like, let's show how terrible things can be mutant by us just like murdering all of them. But hey, let's push let's do this stuff with the X-Men to push the thing. Let's push Magneto to the edge where he does something so drastic that it also turns the tide for mutants. Like you can see the tide turning in terms of like public sentiment for mutants from beyond like just what happened in Genosha. And just some of the I don't know how you guys felt. I was one of my favorite moments from this episode was the reveal that the reporter was a Prime Sentinel. And
Yeah.
Wolverine has the best line of the episode probably when he's like, "I need to talk to Hank about his choice in women." This is awesome. Such a Wolverine line, obviously.
Nod's delivery with some of these lines is still so perfect.
Perfect. His delivery of that line was perfect. I mean, I'm watching this. I actually watched this episode super early this morning. I watched it at like 4 a.m. And I'm laughing out loud at 4 a.m. And it's very, very like intense scene, but like that line was awesome. But like again, it speaks to like, and I thought that was really powerful too, where you have this person who has kind of built themselves as like kind of an ally, but then we saw last episode was like kind of saying some wild stuff that makes you kind of wonder how much of an ally are they, and then you see like wow, like they were at one point in their lives so like concerned about the mutant thing they actually got involved with Operation No Zero Tolerance, like it just goes to show
Right,
you the people that say oh I'm a
right, and
friend,
that's
it could be
right,
somebody who's in theory working with like the equivalent of like white nationalists or whatever. Like that I
right,
thought was very disturbing, but like very powerful message that was sent
right,
by the creators here.
right, and that part is it will it'll be interesting to see how they lay out, you know, um, like how many of these people are people that were willing subjects, and were any of these people that were unwittingly turned into these human sentinels, and I think one of the great things about this series the last couple of weeks, um, has been, Bo DeMayo's tweeting and kind of, closing the gaps a little bit on some of these things that, aren't laid out directly in the series. And one of the things that he did, I think he may have mentioned in one of his tweets, was that she may not have like signed up directly for the OZT, and that she may have
Interesting.
been some of those, captured or taken against her will, something along those lines. But he also mentioned that she was essentially working for Bastion when she interviewed him the first time, and he mentioned that like that whole interview was Bastion almost like gathering extra intel
Mm-hmm.
on the X-Men while the Genosha attack was happening. He was doing that, so it's like there's so many
Yeah.
layers to this, and that while Bastion, that's why I mentioned when I was talking about Bastion as a villain, that like even though we've only gotten introduced to him recently, and we've only got X amount of lines, X amount of scenes with Bastion, is Bo DeMayo pointed it out on Twitter a couple weeks ago or last week that this is a villain that's been here since episode one, essentially, and that he's been
Right.
doing things and pulling strings, and even to that manner that we wouldn't have realized as it's happening, like, oh, this person's a sleeper cell for Bastion, but like now you rewatch that scene and you're like, oh, this line of questioning may have been just
I
trying
mean,
to figure these things out.
yeah, I mean, or present them in a way that doesn't make it look good. Think about that exchange she has with Scott, where where she pushes Scott. She doesn't push him far, but she pushes him enough where he goes off and he starts sounding like like a militant mutant. Like and when you think about again, if he's able to control them in a way that can push certain agendas for him, you realize how powerful he could become. And I am curious, going back, because you're right. It's a good point. Like, obviously the male ran, does a show, so he would have good points. But good point by you bringing it up that like we're hearing Bastion's side of this story. And his, he can't be the most trusted narrator. Obviously, he's a person that was conceived literally to end the mutant race and present in his eyes a better newer race, basically as they presented like the evolution from the Neanderthals to the humans. He wants to do that from the mutants to his next race of people. So he can't be trusted with like face value saying, oh, all these people are just volunteers. But we do know that there are a lot of volunteers because we see them signed up, just showing up, just like, yeah, I'm ready to get my treatment or whatever, and just like willingly doing this treatment. And then of course the people that were outside the X Mansion, I mean, those people, it was no surprise that like 90% of those people then were like all of a sudden ready to go, once they got activated to go. And it was funny actually to see some of them being like, what the hell's going on? Like actually that was kind of like a little like a sneak thing too, because some people were like, I didn't go this far, like, like, or like obviously they don't know what's happening, but we're like saying, oh wow, those people didn't go as far as to sign up for some very experimental uh, undercover government thing to try to thwart the mutant problem. But like a lot of these people did, which I think was quite telling. So the other big part of this episode was us kind of seeing Gene, Scott, and Cable slash Nathan kind of working their angle because they will go on the mission to explore what they thought was going to be a Sentinel facility, but again, just showing how much they're being manipulated right now by Bastion and how they're 5 steps behind. Ends up sending him to his childhood home to then go up against his mom, who is a prime Sentinel, along with the entire neighborhood. And while they walk essentially right into a trap, they do get important information about him because, like any villain cliche, you always got to tell your your opponent exactly everything about you. When in theory, you should just tell them nothing and just try to beat them. So, but anyway, the mom kind of gives whole big backstory on Bastion in his home. They try to get some recognizance before, of course, the attacks happen. One, we kind of see butting heads early between father and son with Cable and Cyclops in terms of how to approach the situation. Cable's been leading, mutant wars at this point probably now for decades. So even though that's his dad, he's probably like, hey, like I know how to handle this. Let me do it. While Cyclops, of course, being Cyclops, wants to take point and do things his way. The other thing about this that was important before we get to like that dynamic with those three, including Jean Grey, was Cable telling the stories of like him going back and talking about trying to stop this because they're like, okay, well, why have you stopped this dog? Which is the question everybody's been asking since episode 5, basically. And he's like, I keep trying, and every time I keep trying, like I get pulled back. Like I can't. I'm not able to finish the job. I'm not able to continue. I see my mother, and then I get pulled away. Um, and he says, I've seen my mother now like die like too many times, which is obviously extremely sad. Why do we think that is? I mean, Beast, first of all, again, expanding the universe. He brings up, Doctor Strange and them boys, the mystics, Carmitage. So you're like, okay, and he talks about things that are essentially things we've talked about in a lot of movies at this point. I mean, Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, Spider-Man, No Way Home. This concept that there are absolute points in timelines that occur at all times and can't be changed. Whether the Nexus points in Spider-Man in the Spider-Man movie or the things that they talk about in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, they're continuing this similar language with this. Yes, canon event. Thank you. Yeah, that was happening in the Spider-Man across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah,
It's like it's
WandaVision might be the fixing point.
yes, WandaVision Nexus points. So we're all in the same game. Like we're all kind of seeing, okay, this is all definitely connected still, and now we're in an animated show on television that's not connecting to this stuff. That's not obviously what if. So that's pretty neat. What do we think is going on with Cable in that aspect, Sham? Like, why do you think he can't finish this deal? I thought that it was an interesting detail that he said, like, when he tried to explain, they had to say, "Where's Cable?" I mean, excuse me, "Where's Bishop?" He kind of like said, "Oh, like he's not able to jump with me because of whatever." He kind of like brushed it off. It was a very simple answer, but like they kind of just dropped it from there. Uh, any thoughts on what's happening? I have some, considering some of the storylines we get later on in X-Men comics. I kind of wonder if a Bishop heel turn is coming, and Bishop is actually the reason why but Cable is not able to finish the job. But any thoughts on what's happening with Cable?
That's an interesting theory. Because at first I didn't. You guys know me. I Mr. Believe what they say, so I believe what he said.
They're gonna face value.
I'm just like, oh, okay, so it's some kind of time issue. All right, got it. On to the next thing. But I mean, he was sent back with Nathan, and he had the virus that was essentially used
By Bastion.
by Bastion to create this entire thing, to just do this entire thing.
Yes.
So he is very central to this whole thing. So I guess it would make sense and I guess they know that he can travel through time and all that kind of stuff. So I guess it would make sense for them to come up with some kind of barrier, something to prevent him from being able to go back and stop this. In terms of comic booky type things, I could see that being a kind of mustache twirly kind of thinking 20 steps ahead type move to make. Whereas, okay, this kid has time travel capabilities or technology, and we definitely want to prevent um, any time travelers. It might not just be him. It might be anybody. Any time travelers from stopping this event from happening because it's pivotal to Bastion's plan. So I definitely think that's a possibility. But initially, I didn't think anything of it. Um, but yeah, that's something that we'll have to see. I also know. I'm also, of course, not to totally change the subject, but I'm also wondering
Yeah.
where what's his name, Forge, in with his storyline and him knowing Bastion and all that, where that fits into all of this, as well. If it can have any role to play through this story. I mean, I know we only have 2 more episodes, but we still haven't. We know he's around, and we still don't know, what his role will be going forward.
Yeah.
That
Can
is.
anyone talk on that?
No, yeah, I was just gonna say that's an interesting thread because it kind of hits on one of the things that I think the bigger question that I think almost everybody has with this episode. um, is where Storm. Like obviously,
Well, we see her.
Storm.
We see her at the very end.
Yeah, we see her at the very end
Mhm.
with Professor X, but it's like,
She's taking a sweet ass time to get to wherever she's going to get
yeah, I'm
back to the
like,
team.
damn, like,
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah,
mean,
like,
we might be fighting some Sentinels for all we know.
yeah.
Who knows?
Storm right now is on some Miss Lauren Hill time, where Lauren Hill has a
100%.
concert at 9 o'clock, and she shows up at midnight. That's kind of where Storm it feels like. It's like Storm, like like you got your powers back, dog. Like, let's go, like
Right.
get back to the team. Like things aren't
And
great.
the male said on Twitter apparently that 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 storyline is kind of run concurrently with what's been happening in with the Bastion stuff, and so I guess we're supposed to assume that like she hadn't really got her powers yet as this is happening. But I just think that that's a little confusing in terms of how they sequence that.
Yeah,
Because it's like it's been like 4 or 5. It's been not 4 episodes, but it's been like 2 or 3 episodes at this point. So she's had her powers back, and we haven't seen her yet. So or at least that she's been on this mission to get her powers back. Um,
well, yeah,
so
because the we see. I mean, when she has her powers back, we see her see the attack on Genosha. So
exactly, that
like
was the end of
so
episode 6.
right. So that's the end of episode 6. Now
So
we're
we're
on
thinking
8.
we're thinking episode 7 we're gonna see her
Right,
probably,
still
and then
not
we
there.
don't, and we're like, oh, so it's gotta be episode
Episode
8.
yeah,
And you
episode 8. Like they're
don't, you
like
don't see
now
her.
that things are really getting busy, and still not. I mean, there was so much rain in these action sequences. I kept waiting for like Storm to really bend the thunder, no pun intended, and it never happened. But again, by the time Charles shows up at the end, he's able to reach out to Storm, and Storm like we see her face like pop up like, I hear Charles. I'm like, where you been? Come on, you need help with the
Yeah, she's in
squad.
her costume and stuff.
And then new costume and everything. So yeah, I don't know what I do wonder what the whole deal is
Mm.
with Storm. On the Bishop thing, the only reason I mentioned Bishop is because folks who are familiar with kind of like the 2010s era of the X-Men Messiah complex is a massive story, essentially kind of restoring a lot of the mutant race through Hope Summers, who is the first naturally born mutant over the course of several years, and Cable is essentially responsible for protecting Hope so that mutant race can survive, where Bishop kind of becomes the bounty hunter, and he feels like it's a curse, and they actually have to kill Hope Summers. So whenever there's a Cable Bishop story, those guys are locked together. I'm always expecting some kind of adversarial relationship, and I was going back and watching old episodes of X-Men 97, X-Men the animated series. I didn't get to actually watch the exact ones that Bo said to watch, but I did want to watch the first Bishop episode, kind of get a reminder like what was his deal when they came in. This is the Days of Future Past episode, and I actually forgot that like for the first 2-3 minutes of the episode, like he's working with the Sentinels. He's a bounty hunter with the Sentinels, and like he captures Wolverine, and Wolverine's like, "How are you like capturing mutants, dog?" He's like, "Look, like they treat me well, like." They ain't got no problem with me, so I just collect them, give you guys up, and then go away. Of course, the Sentinels turn on him like immediately in the episode, and then he has to then decide, all right, well, how am I gonna change this around? And that's when he goes into the future, he goes into the past to figure out how to fix the Days of Future Past error that we see on the show. So I say that to say, Cable says he got lost in the time stream when he showed up. It's like, I mean, first of all, it's like Bishop, you had one job. Like you couldn't get to the you couldn't even get to the future. Like who took care of Cable when he got there? Um, I'm very suspicious of Bishop because of that relationship, and I don't think we've seen the last one. The fact that they made him this like very weird throwaway line, I just think that's gonna be some kind of impact. If it's not in this season, I think it wouldn't be surprised if they do something that
and
teases his presence in the next season.
and the fact that they made him a central figure at the beginning of the series, like they
Yeah,
gave him he's like a part of the intro, and the member of the team, and then he kind of just left the show 2 episodes in. I find it hard to believe that like that that was just it, and that there's
yeah,
no major storyline with him at some point coming down the road.
yeah. No, there's no chance. I totally do agree with that. So the I think my all time my favorite moment from this episode. There's a couple, and we gotta go to the action sequences because you have the Summers trio in the Corvette. You know, that gets pulled back is a drop top, but literally because they're fighting. First of all, the Corvette coming out of the Blackbird was sick. Um, love the Gene line of like, yo, you're gonna have to explain beasts. This is like the third one we lost in a month now. Because like when the last Blackbird just got destroyed in the first episode, I was like, that Blackbird just is destroyed. Like, are they like screwed now? Like, this was part of the plan to have the Blackbird destroyed. But it seems like they're able to mass produce them pretty quickly, which I love to know how that's happening. And if Bo would ever come on this show, I would love to ask him what the deal is with that. But but then you have this kind of car chase scene as they're getting chased by these Prime Sentinels, and and you kind of start to see Cyclops and Jean kind of get their groove back a little bit. I mean, when Cyclops says, let's show these tin cans like what the Summers are about, and like Jean kind of gives him that look of like that smile. Like I got almost emotional just because like we've seen just how distant they've been, and we feel like throughout the course of this episode, Jean slowly I think starts to kind of like come together with like who she is, and some of that is through those conversations with Scott and Nathan, and the realizations of, and Nightcrawler actually helps her a ton when it comes to like understanding what are hers and what are Madeline's. She's like, well, they're all yours because regardless of whether or not you weren't actually there for them, you feel the emotion of all of them. Nightcrawler being like, he's like he always is. He's like the glue guy. Nightcrawler is like, I don't know. I don't want to call him Draymond Green. Draymond's a malcontent, but he's like Drew Holiday. Like he's like the guy that like like he might sometimes he can put up numbers. He puts up numbers in this episode when he gets those swords, and I'm like, oh man, let's go. Like this is what I'm waiting for. But like
the ultimate
sometimes
utility piece.
oh yeah, it's nasty. But sometimes he don't need to have a 30 piece. Just his presence and him just being out there makes everybody better. And we see that with the Jean Grey scene, and we see that in the action sequence with Wolverine, which, I mean, again, just gnarly action sequence. And finally, we get to see Wolverine really go ham. Something that I think people who are Wolverine fans have been waiting for now weeks. You got your wish a little bit when it came to action sequence with him and Nightcrawler teamed up fighting against those Prime Sentinels.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that Nightcrawler, had moments with Rogue the last couple episodes. He's had, he had the excellent funeral monologue with talking about Gambit that was really well written. Again, plenty of moments in this episode. Like, they really put Nightcrawler over in this show, man. Like, it's gonna be hard to leave off of the live action version if they keep putting him over like this. But but yeah, no, I mean, a lot of the one of the major sequences that people are buzzing about is when Nightcrawler grabs Wolverine and then like teleports him, and we see Wolverine getting teleported from his perspective.
So awesome! Oh my god, I'm getting chill thinking about that because I don't think, I mean, I don't think seen that really in live action animation yet. Like, what is a person who's being teleported? What does that look like and feel like? And them showing Wolverine that was so gnarly. This show, like, and we'll get to Magneto in, but something I said from literally the first episode, and something we all agreed upon. Like, I love how this show celebrates the powers of these characters, because I feel like, and I've said this before, that like there's been this like impetus to always kind of like actually like minimize the X-Men's powers, because it's like if you have a conflict and you have all these superpower beings, like how could these superpower beings ever lose? How could they ever be in a gym? How could they ever be outmatched? So what ends up happening is you actually end up not really like showing off their powers in the most fantastic, awesome ways. I think because you're trying to like not make it feel like these characters are all broken. And this show is smartly thrown that book completely out, because we've had Gambit scenes that have been sick, Cyclops scenes that have been sick, Nightcrawler scene that's been sick, Magneto scene at the end of this. Well, we've had now several Magneto scenes. A Rogue scene where she's as strong as the Hulk. Like
Storm,
obviously. Morph has been. I mean, shout out to Morph turning the Juggernaut today. Like, again, it's like this guy's freaking awesome. Like, this show celebrating that, and then they do it in a way where again you don't feel like these characters are like overbroken or whatever, but it just feels like a celebration of who these characters are and what their abilities are. Sham
Many
and
times, I was gonna say, how many times have you logged on to Twitter and seen some like graphic of like Superman against like a million Marvel characters, being like, who wins here? You know,
right,
Superman or like the whole Marvel roster, and it's just like,
right,
and like, those debates, those death battle debates that you see on YouTube, where it's like, you know, Goku versus Superman, who wins, and like, you know, and again, the X-Men, like you said, might be the most toxic conversation of like, oh, you know, Wolverine's so weak, like you never beat anybody, this and that, or you know, Magneto takes out Wolverine in a second, and like we assume that these characters are limited, like you said, are so limited. Like, oh, their power sets are so limited. That's a lot of that's because of the way they're portrayed in media. You know, it's
yeah.
the Cyclops in the X Men movies is only pressing his visor and blasting guys. Like, yeah, you're gonna think, yeah, if he fought, you know, 1-on-1 against somebody, he'd have no shot.
And
But
let's be
Yeah.
real, like when it comes to live action, there is a budget and there's a monetary thing that comes with like expanding their powers beyond what they're willing to spend too. So like
Yeah.
they're giving, I don't want to say well, I'm gonna say it, they're giving Cyclops the bare minimum. There's some of these characters the bare minimum of what they're able to do to keep it kind of
Storm, they just
simple.
turn her eyes white and have like all of a sudden the snow start falling and saying that's her power set.
Yeah, and this show, part of what's made these action sequences so great is they have pulled no punches. And again, it's a small detail like Nightcrawler pulling Wolverine and teleporting him, and us actually seeing what that looks like from Wolverine's aspect was amazing. Um,
Yeah.
Sham, any thoughts on the action
Yeah.
sequences you mentioned at the top of the show that you really thought that was one of the highlights of this show today?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, every week is it's a massive highlight. It's to me that's the biggest thing that separated this show from really all the other superhero animated shows that we've seen. The old show, um, you know, of course, good writing is obviously very important, but the animation being so incredible and so like cutting edge, like this is animation that I have not seen. It's up there with some of the better animated things I've seen, through other streaming services, Netflix and others that use very innovative animation styles, and obviously,
The best thing Studio Mirror's ever done.
art. It could be. It's
It's insane.
incredible. I love the colors pop more than anything else I've seen from them, and it's made to look like a comic book,
Yeah.
but it's animated so well and so fluidly. It's it really is incredible. They really should be. I don't know if they have like a awards or so, or anything for this, but this needs to be. It should be in consideration for something. But yeah, the action has been incredible. Um, the Nightcrawler, just to touch on Nightcrawler a little bit, I mean, this is the best Nightcrawler stuff I've seen since X2, the movie,
Hmm.
which I remember when he was like, trying to assassinate the president and stuff. And that scene, being in the theater and being like, whoa, like
Oh
I've
yeah,
never seen anything like this
that
before.
scene still holds up. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, still holds up like today. But since then, I haven't really seen much of Nightcrawler. This is the best Nightcrawler thing that we've seen, really, since then. Um, and like you said, Wolverine
Nightcrawler
definitely
has a
got his.
really good. He's a really good episode in Wolverine and the X Men, on ironically on Genosha. Um, but yeah, well, quite frankly, there hasn't been a lot of X Men content really since X2. You really think about it, that's not live action. That's not those movies. He showed up in X2, and that was the last we saw of him in live action.
Yeah.
And if you weren't reading
He was in the
comics,
second trilogy, but he was a footnote
what do you
in
say?
Apocalypse. No, like
Oh,
he's a
Yeah,
footnote X-Men.
he was in Apocalypse. Yeah, yeah, that didn't go well.
yeah. He wasn't really
Yeah,
addressed.
that shows you how bad that was. I forgot he was in Apocalypse.
And again, I mean, I've said it.
Totally
This is
forgot.
slightly off topic, but like I mean, coming out of Dune, watching the last two Dune movies, I was like, Timothy Chalamet could play Nightcrawler, and the only problem would be like maybe he's too big of an actor to play Nightcrawler. Maybe you don't want to give Nightcrawler that much of like you don't want another Mystique situation. But shoot, man, if they do Nightcrawler well, like maybe you don't even worry about that.
I'll tell you this, guys. I mean, what this show is so when you live on the internet, sometimes it's hard to get like a feel for like how big something is. So like we do this show, we love this show, we love the X Men, so we're in it. But This feels massive. This feels like, so I say that to say what this show is doing and the impact it's having right now is not minimal in any stretch. This is crossing over, I feel like. Where if at the very least, if you're not watching every week, you know of this thing happening. I think that if I was any of these big name actors, any X-Men character that I'm being pitched, I'm licking my chops and saying, "Show me the money," because I think the money is coming. The X-Men are the next big Marvel live action project that's gonna be a massive thing, and this has only cemented that. Now, how successful it is beyond a first movie or first whatever is going to be up to writing and all the things we talk about weekly on New Generation Hero Talk. But like Timothy Chalamet should not be poo pooing Nightcrawler. Like that could end up being a massive, massive role. Just like Jennifer Lawrence was smart enough to do Mystique. Like that ended up being a massive role, given where the X-Men were, given like how great the first movie was. Like that ended up being a star-making role. Like Charlemagne is already an A-list star, but guess what? Like these X-Men are going to be A-list. So Nightcrawler may not be Wolverine or Cyclops, but damn it, like you want to be on this team. Just like Renner wanted to be Hawkeye. Just like Scarlett Johansson wanted to be Black Widow. Like this is the next big thing. So get on board.
So I want to first of all, I agree with everything that you said, but also uh, want to give a lot of credit to Bo DeMail, who has done an excellent job on the series. I know this isn't Hero Talk. We may
For
have
sure.
to have a Hero Talk with regards to what may be going on behind the scenes, what the causes behind him possibly not being involved going forward. Um, but he's done an incredible job on this series. Uh, I would be um, I would be thrilled to know if he was involved going forward. I think it's we don't know what happened obviously, but I think it is and like you said, Kendall, with him being so transparent as he's been, which is a welcome, which is something that's welcome. I think that should be
It's
welcome.
good. Yeah, and it's
What
good to see. I mean,
Yeah, similar to what
regardless of
James
what
Gunn
happened,
and
we're glad that whatever happened wasn't so serious that he can't be on Twitter.
I mean, we
yeah,
hope so. To be
exactly.
fair,
Well, yeah,
we
Right,
we
exactly.
hope so at least.
So
But he's
right.
taking
yeah,
that risk. Yeah.
so I again, we don't know what happened. I hope whatever did or didn't happen, we don't know, wasn't so serious that he can't be brought back or given some kind of other chance, because this is so high quality to me that even now I'm just like I was watching this episode and I'm like, did someone at Marvel like feel threatened by him or something? Like this is incredible because it's that good to the
Mm-hmm.
point where I'm like, they got rid of him after seeing
I mean,
this.
look, I mean, we talk about it in sports a lot, and it applies. This is an entertainment industry, and it's a money industry, so it applies to this as well, a little bit as well. But there is a talent and value like thing that you have to weigh when it comes to whatever sort of issues that somebody has off the field, off the court. Um, and so I don't. Again, we don't know what happened with Bo DeMail. There's speculation. Maybe it may just be as simple as he was not fun to work. You know that writers. There've been writers that have complained. So, I didn't really like working with this guy. Whatever. But like, and again, we don't know what's true and what's not. But if that is the case, yeah, if you're like just a regular guy, like if you're somebody who's writing on She-Hulk and you were like that, like maybe somebody would be like, yeah, we might be able to just move on from this person. But with as good as this has been, like Marvel has to consider, what are the like James Gunn, like they realized like they had a situation with James Gunn. There were some problematic old tweets that surfaced, and Disney made a decision to move on from James Gunn. and eventually came to the conclusion James Gunn is too good, and the stuff that there were and DC came to the conclusion James Gunn is too good for us to keep him out of the loop, for these old tweets. And so we'll capitalize on the situation. And Disney brought him back. So, those are conversations that Marvel has to have. Again, they have all the details. So, they know why they made their decision. But did they know? I mean, this thing was about to come out. And I think that they knew that this was going to be popular. I think they knew this was going to be good. So they made their decision knowing that this was a good show. So that's the only part that I think about. But man, I mean, that'll be, as this thing plays out, that'll be honestly the most fascinating thing to see going into Comic-Con. When I'm assuming that's when we get a rollout of this X-Men live action stuff to some degree. Yeah. And, we may not know who's working on it at that point, but that conversation leading into it is Bo DeMeo involved? Or is he involved in future seasons of X-Men 97? To what degree? That's going to be a hot button topic.
Yeah, and look, I think for me on just the Bo DeMeo topic, I feel like it's very hard without knowing what happened. Like, I think that there's a impetus or hope to be like, well, whatever it was, can they figure it out? It's like, well, we don't know what it was, so I can't say for sure like, oh, he definitely should be back, or they should just figure it out, because I don't know what he did. I don't know. It's and like, is there a public interest that they should tell us what he did? That becomes a conversation that's long, because I don't know who was affected. What, like, there's just so many layers to it. And I do want to say, and I'll give Bo his flowers in a second, because this is amazing stuff. He all he shows, he has a great team. Like, he put together a great team of writers, and a great team of creators along with him. He's not like just penning this just him on his own and saying, all right, go out there and do what I said. Like, he has a team of writers that are helping with this. So I want to make that clear. Now, what I will say is, like, again, this is the best thing Marvel has done since Endgame. I don't even think it's really that close. Like, I think as we get more and more further along in this season, like, if we're taking out No Way Home, which I think for this sake of argument we should, there's nothing close to this. And it may say, oh, that's nothing. It's like, well, no, there were some good things in this phase. I mean, WandaVision was really good. There were projects that people really liked in this phase, but this is clearly on another level. So if it is a situation where it was a behavioral thing or a disrespect thing regarding him and supervisors or him and whatever, there's a hope that, for me, I look at it and say they're already a season ahead. Like, season 2 is basically they just putting the final touches.
It's already been written.
It's been created, it's been written, it's been voiced. So you have some time. We could have a cooler heads prevail. Maybe they gotta not overlook. That's not what I want to say. But they gotta, like, see past whatever happened, and maybe if he offers an apology, maybe he has to apologize for whatever he did. Like, there's sometimes people get fired because, like, they say, yo, you can't do this, it's unacceptable. And they say, well, kiss my ass. And again, I don't know what happened. I'm not at all speculating on what happened. I'm just giving a real human situation. They say, well, kiss my ass. And they say, all right, well, like, if you're really not going to accept any responsibility, then you're fired. And then sometimes it takes all right, well, look, let's talk and whatever. And maybe if that could be the situation, then let's hope that that's the case and they can figure this out. This is not a thing where, like, a new season is due tomorrow and, like, we just going to be delayed, or we're going to have somebody who is not Bo DeMeo doing it because of time. But they got time. So that would be, like, the one thing I would hold on to for those who hope that Bo DeMeo comes back. I, for one, want to know what he did before he comes. I mean, they fired him like a week before the thing. I mean, it was a terrible headline. So, like, the idea that they would do that for just, like, some arbitrary reason, I don't believe, but everybody's going to have their own opinion.
It reminds me a lot, in sports, it reminds me a lot of the Celtics situation with Ime Udoka a couple of weeks.
Right. It definitely does.
Like, what happened? Like, this guy just went to the NBA Finals, and now he's not coaching, and you just fired him? Like, what? And they didn't say anything for, like, a week. Eventually, we had to figure out what happened, but we still don't really know exactly what happened.
We still don't know what happened with that.
Yeah, right. And he just, we thought, like, oh, he'll never coach again, and then all of a sudden now he's coaching the Houston Rockets. So, like, so then that left people, even players on the Celtics, being like, well, then why did we fire him if the Rockets could hire him? Like, And so that's where it gets HR stuff, and so that's why it's so complicated. And when you don't know, like you said, when you don't know what happened, it's almost impossible.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
why the
wondering
Celtic
if
thing is a good example too, because like the Celtics are an example where it's like they, the Emu Udoka thing. For those who don't follow sports, Emu Udoka had a improper relationship with a someone who's deemed not an underling. That's not the way to put it, but someone who's like underneath him, and an employee, and a fellow employee, but someone who's like he was superior to, and there may have been like someone wanted advances that continued maybe beyond the relationship that was consensual. Again, there's very little details on this, so this is just all we know as of right now. But like that situation, very little details beyond this. Beyond that, we don't know anything about the Bozeman thing, which is very weird. I think at this point, but to the Celtic point,
maybe Marvel doesn't want it out in part because they may want to bring him back. Like maybe they're just like,
well, I
because
think
if
that
they were in this world where they just wanted to bury him, they would have just leaked this stuff. But this guy was the worst guy to ever work with. Terrible dude. This is XYZ. Maybe they're letting it play out in a certain
way. That is why I'm saying like time. like it's very weird. No one said anything. He's still tweeting out here. Like, I mean, he did literally create the show, but like usually like a creator gets fired for a show they did, like they don't want to touch it. But he's out here just like still promoting the show, and his name's on it. And he it's just right, but it's very bizarre. We don't see this. So yeah, you give it time, but like the Celtic thing though, like the Celtics move on, and then they got a coach who's obviously worse, just from a basketball standpoint. If you feel like you're a basketball fan, but like they're still a great team, and they're still like they still won. And that's what goes back to the Bo DeMail point, where it's like doesn't mean that the show can't still be awesome beyond him, even though we know what he put into the show set a foundation that is Teflon, that is iconic. This show is iconic.
Yes.
So yeah, I hope for the sake of the culture, I hope that if he can come back, he can come back. If he should not be allowed to come back, then he shouldn't. That's how I feel. Like if he did something so terrible that he shouldn't be back, then he shouldn't be back. I don't care that you're a great creator. You can't destroy people, or you can't whatever, or be a criminal. If that's what he did, I don't think he's a criminal. I don't think he'd be tweeting. So, but if he doesn't really back, then I don't care. You did a good show. Then they gotta figure out how to move on without him. But if there's a way to move him on, I say bring him back. Then I hope that they can. Like you mentioned, James Gunn was a great example. I don't know if Kevin Feige would have fired James Gunn. I think that was a Disney decision. This feels a lot like that. I wonder if whatever he did got Disney to say this guy's got to go, and maybe that's why he's still tweeting. He
didn't realize
love for Marvel. Right? They didn't know this was gonna be, and then maybe Kevin Feige would go back to him and say, "Yo, dog, like y'all serious? You're gonna let this guy go?" And then maybe he'll be back. I think there's a chance he'll be back, but I don't. But it's without knowing what he did, it's hard to really say. I do want to get to the end of the episode though before we give scores here, because the end of the episode is massive. So, one, you have Val Cooper. First of all, one quick thing. I don't want to labor on it. I know we're running long here, but like I said last weekend, Mr. Sinister tells Val, like, yeah, like this dude's crazy, but like I'm just using him for my own thing because he's Mr. Sinister. Of course he is. He's like, this guy is giving me just like a petri of like DNA for me to just like constantly work on, just like a endless collection of DNA. Who knows if I can do him? Like, this guy's a freaking creep. But that's Mr. Sinister. It's okay. He's on his own. He's on his own side mission, as he always is, despite him working for Bastion. But then you have Val Cooper, realizing how sick this is. She tried to talk to Magneto, say, "Yo, I really didn't think this would be like this." Whatever. Magneto ain't saying nothing. He's just like in Val's silence, basically. She eventually decides to break him out. They haven't done a great job with like the aspect of the. I feel like there's some things that Bastion's getting a little sloppy with some of this stuff. Though I don't know. Some of the stuff could be something he actually wanted. But like the fact that like someone was even able to allow Magneto to get out feels like not the greatest idea. But Magneto makes a extremely bold decision, one that certainly stops the threat of the prime sentinels that are slaughtering people all over the place. But takes out electricity all across Earth. He uses himself as an EMP. He uses himself as like the tenor to the top of the North Pole, and uses the electromagnetic fields he creates to vibrate across the Earth, wipes out the entire electricity across the entire world. During the scene, we see Spider-Man. Spider-Man, 90s Spider-Man, who's swinging through New York City, like, sees the power rise. Like, oh, what the hell's going on? He doesn't say anything. We don't get the voice, but it was confirmed by both Tomatoes. That is the Spider-Man from the 1990s cartoon. So, mind-blowing moment, obviously, to see that. What that means for the future, whether we could see Spider-Man in an episode in a more robust way. There have been calls because of how popular the show is to bring back that 90s Spider-Man show. I'll tell you what, after seeing that scene, I'm going to go say I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. I'm putting that right now. I think we're going to see Spider-Man 90s show brought back.
Spider-Man 98.
Spider-Man 90, I think it's coming. I think now they're going to have the long conversation with Sony, and that's going to be a whole fight. But I think Marvel has to do it now because of how popular the show is.
And
So
they've got the rights to, as far as we know at least, to the animated stuff. But
yeah, because they're doing this other show freshman year that, and I tell you what, the fact that they like, you got to beg them to talk about that joint tells me that they gonna do that show. They gonna do the season that he got put together maybe, but I think that the pivot is coming and it's maybe already happened. So Spider-Man shows up, but we see a bunch of other big cameos too. You got Omega Red, you got Silver Samurai. We see several different characters across the world. Kind of seeing what Magneto has done. Wolverine makes first of all, Val Cooper, when she releases Magneto in her spiel to Bastion, was like, what you did in Genosha showed us the one thing, because the mutants, while they were fearful, they were not surprised by what was happening because of just like the oppression that they faced, and it made them all realize the truth, that is, Magneto was right. As Magneto then turns off the electricity everywhere, Wolverine makes the important play that he's like, well, Magneto did it. And of course, he's like, oh yeah, he saved us, right? He's like, no, no, Morph, he did. Yes, he saved them. That's not what we're talking about. We have a bigger issue here. Magneto has declared war, because he's done will be interpreted as a terrorist attack on the entire world, in a way that was like obviously very profound. So, which sets up, of course, right on cue. And he's like, man, I wish the professor was here. And of course, this guy Charles crashes in, and he's here, and he's like, oh yeah, to me, my X-Men. And I cannot wait for this reception to Charles. I think someone's gonna punch him in the face. I think somebody's gonna punch. I think he's getting snuffed, because things are not going well, and he's showing up the last minute, and they're gonna learn that, oh, you just chilling with Alonzo. They're gonna learn a lot of stuff, and some will be very happy. It seems like Wolverine and Morph will be happy. I think there will be some that won't. I think Cyclops will feel away. I think if Magneto actually ends up seeing Charles, he'll feel away. I think Rogue will feel away. I think there are people who will feel away. Beast will feel away. I think there are people who will feel away when Charles just shows up being like, all right, here I am, I'm going to save y'all. But that was, the crux at the end of this episode was basically two tempos of the mutant cause. Magneto taking actions into his own hands, stop the threat, but also do this really rash action that's going to have big repercussions. And then Charles finally landing from the Shi'ar Empire, and to come back to the X-Men, something we saw, of course, that was going to happen in episode 6. So, Sham, how did you feel how this episode wrapped up the end here with the two big reveals at the end?
Though it was a great ending, it was. I think it was kind of the perfect ending to this first part. Get two major moments: Magneto shutting down all the electricity, and making a massive statement, essentially, that he's done playing around. We've kind of been listening to commentary, I'd say really throughout the entire series, about, oh, there's a conflict brewing between mutants and humans, and is it going to boil over? Is there going to be you have people asking, is there going to be a war? Are we going to go to war? Or what's going to happen? And Neil's just like, boom, just no
Like,
more
don't make me,
electricity.
yeah. And we saw in that UN scene, he basically said, "Don't make me press the button. Don't make me
Yeah,
press. Don't make me press the button." But
yeah,
what happened
and I
with
mean,
Genosha? What's happening with the Prime Sentinels? He pressed the button.
yeah, and I mean, in a doing something like that would kill millions of people. Uh,
Yes.
Yes, 100%.
anyone that's in transit using any kind of electricity, um,
Hospitals,
Yeah.
like you said,
Planes.
hospitals,
planes.
people,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, people in planes. There's a lot of people are going to die in probably in very horrific and probably very painful ways, and it is going to be very, you know, it's good. Will have significant, very, very significant impact.
And
So
now the X-Men who have now the public knows has lied about lied about Xavier in their public's eyes. They've lied about Xavier,
right.
and to some degree they did, and they hitched their wagon to Magneto. Magneto was their leader. Like, they had the old UN thing that was televised where they're like, yeah, like he's gonna go for his crimes, but like we think he should be fine and he's gonna be the new leader of the team. Like he there is attached to him as they've ever been. So
Mhm.
there is no separating what Magneto does from the X-Men anymore.
And we even see through Sunspot's mom that there are humans that don't feel good about the X Men. They don't like hate all mutants, but they don't love the X Men right
Right.
now. Um, and and just kind of going over the Charles portion, I agree. It definitely seems like there's going to be a schism. We talked about before Beast seeming to be more radicalized, and Rogue seems to be more radicalized. And we all know Professor X is going to show up and try to do the kumbaya, try to do the, we can work this out, we can work together. And I think things have gotten to a point where this conflict is going to happen, and especially in the last two episodes, it's not going to be resolved through peaceful means. Like, we're going to see a conflict happen. So
Oh yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how it turns out.
Kendall, thoughts on how the episode wrapped up with this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, I thought that I mean, first of all, you mentioned the Spider-Man Easter egg, really cool. Omega Red. I mean, he's gonna get out of whatever containment he's in.
Mm-hmm.
The people in that facility were like, "Holy crap!" Did
Yeah.
not think this was happening today at work. Um,
Should have called
and
out sick that
so,
day.
yeah, yeah. But yeah,
Should have
no,
used
I
that
mean,
PTO.
yeah, 100%. They're in a situation where, I mean, they woke up the beast in terms of Magneto, um, whether it be you mentioned the first scene at the UN and the Storm situation, and then the Genosha situation, and now he's just at a point where he's just like, I'm done with all this, man. Um, and like you said, just had to cool the temperature down, so to speak. Um, but I mean, just a fascinating, thing that we're going to see play out. Because, like you said, even though what he did was a very rash and dangerous chess move, it might be well received by a lot of a lot of the mutants on this series. It might be well
Yeah.
received by some people, whereas Charles's messaging may look a little funny in the light because it's like,
Yep.
you've been doing all this and you've been off world. Uh,
Right.
while all this has been going on, you've been, you know, on an alien planet becoming a king. Like, this is,
Right.
it may look a little strange to some people, and like you said, you called it a week or two ago. Whenever we got that reveal that this was not going to play out well, um, I thought it was funny that when they showed that, like, that feed in the news that, yeah, Charles Xavier on an alien planet. I'm like, man, they're so desensitized to the fact that, like, an alien, like, this guy's on an alien planet, and we have a satellite footage of that. Like, if I would have been like, this is fake. Like, there's no way this is real. Like,
Ken was like,
doctored
fake
this.
news.
Not deep fakes in 1997. Because there's no way. But when you got mutants running
I wish
around,
I had that. I wish I had that Soldier Boy drop where he's like, "This is fake. On my mama fake. On my grandma, this is fake." That's
yeah.
Kendall.
But no, they're you know, they've set up a very interesting uh, kind of back and forth that's going to happen between those two sectors. Um, and again, there's still some figures. I'm still curious where is Mystique? You know, like you feel like she's out there somewhere. And knowing Mystique and knowing this show and the way their attention to detail, like again, we're all assuming she's either Val Cooper now or she's gonna wind up Val Cooper by the end of the series. How do we know she's not one of the other X Men, or how do we know like she's not Beast?
So
You
I
know,
mean, my thing is, if she was Val, would one of those Prime Sentinels have like registered that? Because she was in that bunker with
that
all
is true.
those,
I
supposedly
was
with all those
thinking.
Prime
Now her
Sentinels.
powers are really good, so you make you wonder. You know, do her powers match that to some degree? I thought, you know, one of the things that was interesting is they never put a collar on her, which makes sense. Obviously, why would you put an inhibitor collar on a human? But like, if they did, like, that would have revealed who she was, if in theory. Um, so you're right. I mean, that would be part that would you would think squash that idea. But is she really not in this series? I mean, it's possible. You know, I mean,
Well,
there's other.
I don't think it was an accident that they decided to name drop Mystique. She's name
Yes,
dropped in this episode because Nightcrawler talks about his connection to Rogue, and there's Mystique is his biological mother. Mystique is Rogue's adoptive mother. Um, I I I I I I don't know. We'll see. I mean, again, they definitely pushed it towards it not being Val Cooper, but like you said, Kendall, it does open up to like, could she be someone else that we've already seen that we haven't seen yet? You know, I don't know. Mystique is always in the wings, waiting to make an impact in some degree. So it definitely could be down the pipe, but I don't know. I still for some reason think that Val Cooper is Mystique, but again, there's a lot of evidence for this episode. So last episode suggests that she isn't. Let's get to final scores for this episode. So this is episode 8, Tolerance is Extinction Part 1, the first part of the 3-part finale for X-Men 97 Season 1. I will go to Kendall first for a score out of 10. What are you going to give this episode?
I'm gonna go 9 out of 10. I think this was another very good episode. You know, it did a really good job of keeping us engaged. Like you said, it's the first part of this 3-part series, 3-part episode. But it really like it feels like it's a standalone episode, right? Like I didn't feel like I needed a to be continued because every episode has been so fast paced and been so breakneck speed that like this doesn't really feel any different than what we've gotten so far. So, um, I am very curious to see what happens next episode. But my only minor drawbacks would just kind of be the general thing we talked about with pacing and
Mm-hmm.
where's Storm been, where's Professor X been. Professor X is a little more believable because he's coming from another planet, but
I
like
think I think there's some storyline angle to be like, where's he been? I think we're gonna see some
yeah, yeah,
some
yeah, that we're definitely gonna get right.
right. There's a reason why they're
Um,
making him
and
come
and
in
I
this way.
think when you're doing an X-Men show, I think that they made the decision because when you talk about Rogue, like they made it, this is happening concurrently with I'm not Rogue, Storm. This is happening concurrently with her getting her powers back. But I think they also made the conscious decision that we can't have like 20 characters running around at the same time. There's got to be some characters that are just not doing anything. So Rogue is knocked out. Magneto's being held captive.
Mm-hmm.
Storm is off doing something with Forge. Like they had to keep some of these characters off the grid because so they could focus on a select set of characters. So I think it makes sense why. I don't know if I buy the Storm excuse because I'm like, man, like again, that was 3 episodes ago, and
Yep.
like how long was that journey? Because they made that journey super fast. So I'm
Yep.
like, if you're gonna make it super fast, then she gotta come back. And if it's not gonna
Yeah.
be super fast, then it makes more sense. But
Right.
so those are the only minor nitpicks. I also thought the scene with where Sunspot and Jubilee kind of give themselves up was kind of odd. Where like they're at the they run into the party and then they're just like, all right,
Well,
I guess we'll
yeah,
surrender.
yeah. Well, the mom was like, "Don't resist," basically.
Yeah, yeah. I
Which
guess that must have been like maybe a callback to that conversation they had about like doing what's best for the business.
yep.
And maybe them just being like, all right, yeah, we're not gonna fight this. Like, it's not good. All these people, like, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in the show about like what is good allyship, and we see the reporter not seem like an ally but not show great allyship. We see the mom seem like an ally but not show great allyship. So they do a good stuff. They do a good job with that, and those scenes with Sunspot in this episode certainly attest to that. When Jubilee wasn't having it, she was like, "Let's just go spend this woman's money. Let's get out of here. This woman sucks." Sham, what are you giving this episode for episode 8?
I'll give it. I'll give it an 8.5. I thought it was a very good episode. Um, it was. I love the story beats, the reveals that we got with regards to Bastion's story and his like why he's doing what he's doing, what his backstory is. Getting more cables, awesome. Seeing more of these Prime Sentinels, having them all be activated, and seeing all that happen, all the action sequences we got were awesome. Um, and then the end was just that was like the cherry on top. So I thought it was a very good episode. I mean, I'm still, of course, of course, I mentioned this several times. I'm still waiting to see, Storm get back in the mix. We got Professor X back, so very interested to see how what he does and how his presence will affect what's been going on because he was always such a central piece of the original show that having him in this show is just going to be. I hope it has the impact that it should because he's Professor X.
we got him
So
back in the
I
intro.
am
That was
curious,
awesome.
huh?
No, like, we got him back in the intro. That was cool.
Yeah, I saw he was in the
Oh
intro.
yeah,
So when I saw the intro, I was like, okay, I said, well, he's gonna make it here because you wouldn't put him in the intro if he wasn't gonna make it. Uh,
yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's I'll give it an 8.5. I thought it was a very good episode, and I think it's a good setup for the next two parts.
yeah, I'll give this one an 8 for me. This was really good. And like the scoring in this episode is very interesting because it's just the bar is so high. You can't give out 9s and 10s every week. So like this, don't think 8 and think this is weak. This was phenomenal. Um, I guess really I think it's almost an 8 really only for the like what this episode is trying to accomplish, which is there's going to be a lot of backstory. They did do a lot of action, but because of that, like ends up kind of setting itself up for a bigger finale, bigger things to happen in the next two episodes. So it's fast paced, but again, not too rushed. Um, but it is somewhat a means to the end, literally the end of the season. And so I will go 8. But man, again, the Bastion stuff I thought really well done. Great job updating his origin in a way that makes more sense. That doesn't seem super goofy. Action sequences, some of the best action sequences of the season are in this episode. Shout out to giving Wolverine a real great scene in this one. I think the reason why this probably couldn't be higher was I thought the Jubilee Sunspot stuff, it just felt so left of what was going on and so insignificant to what was going on that stuff took me out of the episode a little bit when it happened. If that wasn't in there, or they found a better C plot, maybe this goes up to 8.5 or 9. I couldn't go higher than that because of really that. So, but that's it was probably of a 30-minute episode, maybe 5 minutes of the episode, but it was still again some phenomenal stuff
My
from
favorite
the crew this week.
my favorite part of the episode was that cameo in that scene with Doctor Doom and Zemo,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
and then the whatchamacallit, and then the Magneto scene with Spider Man showing up. Like those are the two best moments of the episode for me, in terms of
I
all
am
in.
I am praying that Marvel sees the success of the show and really invest in 2D animation in a robust, serious way that isn't like we gotta do something that looks like what's in the movies. Like this thing is, it just shows you. And I'm not here to bash on What If at all. I like What If, but like Marvel for the last, I don't know, whenever they got rid of Earth's Mightiest and the Spectacular Spider-Man, I guess that's like now almost 15 years now, whatever. Like
Yeah,
15 years of 15 years of this. Like we got to make sure that there's synergy between what's on the movies and what's in the cartoons, and how much that is just kneecapped any real creative freedom and creative chance for them to do really cool stuff. Like this show is showing you, like, get away from that stuff, man. Like, and I think again, I have very good confidence that I think they will, because the show has been so well received, and I think it's a great wake up call. Because, when I saw Kevin talk about like what the prerequisites were for getting this show done, like a lot of it was like, we have to get a lot of the actors back, we got to get the music back, X, Y, and Z. But it felt like when it came to story, he was gonna kind of let the creator give him a story that I guess he thought worked, and then move from there. Like this, to me, this isn't a Kevin Feige baby, which is why I think this is great for Marvel. I hope Kevin actually learns a lot from what worked here. Hope he learns a lot for success with the X-Men moving forward in live action, but also what he learns from what animation can do for the Marvel Studios brand as a whole, because clearly it is extremely valuable.
And what also made this show work so well, and something I didn't think they'd be able to do so well, is, especially with the way they were marketing it, was that like this, while it is a continuation of the old series, it's so new. Like, it's so different. Yeah. That's what James Gunn, because somebody tweeted at James Gunn, like, oh, now we got to do Justice League Unlimited 05 or something like that. And he was like, I love X-Men 97. It's great. What's great about it is that it's new and different and totally nothing like we've seen before, which is why we're not going to do Justice League Unlimited, So he's sort of, kind of nudging at it, but basically saying, like, this isn't really like what we had before. They took that template and modernized it in a way that, anybody that had complaints about the fact that, including myself, that we weren't getting a new X-Men series, can't really complain, because it is a new X-Men series.
Those critics are quiet. They So, and then the show does have its critics. A lot of people aren't happy with like the whitewashing of Sunspot, and there's definitely reasons to maybe be upset about that. But like, really outside of that, like, those folks, especially because some of those folks were even chirping after the first episode, trying to say, "Oh, this just feels like they just rehashing the first show." Like, they've been quiet for months now, because now we're in week 8, so like we're really far ahead. Like, they've been quiet for months now. It's hard to really. And I'm not saying you can't be critical of anything, of course, but like the large chirping of like, oh, they're just doing rehashes of what happened already, and like this isn't gonna move the story, the X-Men or the mutants or even the show forward in a way. And it's like, you can't say that with a straight face. You can't say that with a straight face right now. You can't. But I think that's a good place to leave it for this week. So this is a super long episode, and I don't know, maybe as we get to finale time, maybe this is kind of just going to end up being how these episodes go. I hope we don't end up going an hour and a half during every one of these. But look, we have like 40 viewers currently with us, so like y'all rocking with us for this entire stretch is awesome. So shout out to you guys for checking us out. Again, if you like this content, we do podcasts on superhero stuff, Star Wars, sports, all on the New Generation Podcast Network. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Also, you can check us out, obviously, on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, shout out to the folks watching us there. The YouTube channel, New Generation Media, is where you'll find us there. Shout out to my folks on X that are following me on X/Twitter. That's where you can find me, EJ_Stu, where we watch us. So shout out to y'all following us there. And follow our social media handle for Twitter/X, New Generation Pod. You can catch Shamari on Twitter, on Snapchat, Instagram, MCCI22. You can find Kendall on Twitter, New Gen Ken. That'll do it for now. Thank you guys so much for checking this out. For Kendall, for Shamari, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.